This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Welcome to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spira. Today we're going to talk to Dr. Dan Ross, a new friend that we met on a Facebook dental site. He is completely fee for service only in the last couple of years. Started to work at a DSO, stayed there for 8 years, bought in, and then got bought out, which is an interesting story. Bought his own practice, bought another practice, merged it, and now operates and runs two completely independent fee for service practices for about the last 2 years. He's going to talk about his journey out of network, how he got out of it, some of the things he does, and big proponent of being your own boss and, setting your own course and sailing it that way. And it can be done anywhere. He's in Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin, in the greater Milwaukee area. So we're going to really enjoy this conversation. As always, our podcast, the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast, brought to you by Kettenbach Dental. They are very excited to announce fluoride varnish, brand new treatment called Profacil. It is no longer with alcohol or resin, and instead it's a new treatment delivered by mucoadhesive dimethicone gel. It leaves your teeth feeling smooth and silky. No grit. Contact Kettenbach today for more details and do more varnishes patients will appreciate. Call 877-532-2123 or visit kettenbachusa.com. Please listen, like, click, subscribe. We're still trying to get the whole merging with the iTunes. We currently have one, but there's two different ones, but it's the same podcast and it's the same feed. Click like, share it with your friends, leave reviews, any of those things like you would in your private practice helps us grow, gets the message out. If you don't like it, well, please hit me up. Let me know what you think, what you'd like to see different, or if you want to be a guest on the show, let me know. Love to have you. Love putting people's stories out there that are successes and, that journey into the fee-for-service land or out of network. SonnySpira@gmail.com if you want to hit me up. Okay, folks, enjoy the show. Thank you.
My name is Drew Burns, and I'm a part of a small group of dentists who believe something crazy. We believe that the standard of care is just not good enough. We demand the best of ourselves and the best for our patients. We believe that the best way? No, the only way to practice dentistry is on our own terms. If you ask the dental consultants or the corporate CEOs, they tell you that what we're doing isn't smart, that fee-for-service dentistry is dead, and that the golden age of dentistry is over. Yet, while others focus on profits first, we focus on the patient first. And yet our offices are some of the most profitable in the entire country because we invest in ourselves and we are doing things right. It's our name on the door and it's our reputation on the line. My name is Drew Burns and I am a fee-for-service dentist. This is the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast and these are our stories.
Welcome to the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spira. Today we have a guest of ours, Dr. Dan Ross, and we are going to have a little conversation with him. He currently is operating two completely independent fee-for-service practices. He's got an interesting story, and we're going to talk all about it. So Dr. Dan Ross is a 2007 graduate from Marquette University School of Dentistry. He is in private practice in New Berlin, Wisconsin. He started his career working at a DSO right out of school. Then after 8 years, transitioned into private practice ownership. In 2018, he bought a second practice and merged it with his original. In late 2022, he bought a second standalone location and now runs both of these offices completely fee for service. Good for you. Dr. Ross is married with 3 kids and loves the freedom he has to spend with his family and travel. So welcome, Dan. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So where'd you grow up, man?
I've been in Milwaukee, Wisconsin all my life.
All right. Okay. And undergrad was?
Also Marquette University.
Okay.
So undergrad and dental school.
Did you look anywhere else?
I really didn't. I had an opportunity for undergrad. I was looking at both University of Wisconsin and Marquette seemed to be the better fit for me. At that point, I didn't even know that I wanted to go the dental school route. But while I was going through my undergrad, I had an opportunity to do a summer program at the dental school, and that kind of really helped me get my foot in the door for an application process. So there really wasn't other schools that I was really entertaining at the time.
Pretty cool. First person I've talked to that kind of had that spark from actual like an actual dental school. What's your folks? What's their background? What'd you kind of grow up around?
None of my family ever even graduated from college. You know, my dad went to about a year and a half worth of college before he dropped out. So he's been doing sales all of his career. My mom was mostly a stay-at-home mother all of her life. We were a foster family for about 16 years, so just staying at home and taking care of kids was her main responsibility.
Wow, that takes a special person doing that.
Certainly does. There was a lot of dedication in doing all that. It wasn't easy to raise 4 kids of their own and then to do it all over again. And they wound up adopting 3 of them on top of the 64 that they had come through their home in the 16 years. It was always a full house and never a dull moment.
You had to have a busy dinner table.
Certainly was.
Wow.
Yep, lots of activities and lots of people having to pitch in and help when things are as busy as it was.
Okay. And any influence at all in like being on your own or like that entrepreneurial spirit? Anybody, in your life?
I don't know. I think you kind of have some thoughts of like what you would want to do when you're younger and you don't necessarily know what direction things are going to lead. I was always more interested in medicine than I was dental school.
Okay.
Before I did the summer program at the dental school at Marquette, I was volunteering at a local hospital, and I wound up realizing that I didn't like it at all. I was in the ER, and I thought it'd be exciting and just kind of nonstop trauma, this and that. And it was really a lot more people with backaches and trouble breathing, and it just was nothing that I thought it was going to be. So that's when I kind of started looking at alternatives. There was an individual from the dental school who came and gave a talk to a pre-professional society that I was a part of. That's kind of like the point of the society, was to kind of give you exposure to different careers. And she came and gave a talk from the dental school. And yeah, it sounded pretty intriguing. She mentioned the summer program. I really fell in love with the working with your hands. That's always something I enjoyed. And it started to grow on me with the ability to say, like, own your own practice. I had my childhood dentist. He kind of owned his own thing, and to be able to like be your own boss, I just saw that there was a lot of freedom with that. And everything, I just kind of ran away with it from that point.
That's neat. That's neat. So when did you tell your childhood dentist that you had an interest in going to dentistry?
I don't know that I ever specifically told him that I had an interest in going into dentistry, but I was always kind of a bit of a class clown, and I was in the same class as his kid was. And we had stopped going to see him for a long while because my parents lost their dental insurance, and they had got it back one year, and I went back and I had a t-shirt on from high school. I was a 4.0 student, and I wore this t-shirt for the honor roll. And he made a comment to me asking me something about, did I beat some kid up to steal that from him? And at that point, he kind of realized that I wasn't joking, and that I was. I kind of turned around and put my nose into the books and started doing well in school and dedicating myself to that. So I did wind up seeing him. We run into each other semi-frequently still at Wisconsin Dental Association meetings and things of that nature. So I guess he kind of knew when I was already going through it at that point.
Going out of network can be really scary, but staying in network can be even scarier and riskier too, long term. Insurance reimbursements aren't even keeping pace with inflation, which can really affect the quality of your work, not to mention the quality of your life. I'm Allison Bernstein.
I'm Dr. Josh Bernstein. We went out of network over 20 years ago, and we can show you what worked, what didn't, and how you can do it with minimal risk.
ThriveOutOfNetwork.com teaches you everything you need to know, including the most important part, which is getting your team on board. It teaches them how to communicate with patients and getting them comfortable with the entire process.
Go to thriveoutofnetwork.com and check it out today. That's thriveoutofnetwork.com.
You were in dental school with his son at the same time?
Nope, just regular K through 8th grade.
Okay. Okay. And then did you intern or did you shadow? Did you have a
Not
professional?
specifically with him, but I kind of expressed an interest. And again, this would have been in high school. When my brothers or family needed fillings done or things like that, I was always curious enough, and he would always be nice enough to let us kind of be in the operatory and let us watch. So that was kind of neat. In dental school, I definitely did some internships. So I had 3 total doctors that I bounced around from office to office. One of the internships was actually run through the school as an opportunity for seniors, and the other 2 individual offices were more so just things that I had set up out of my own curiosity. I think one was my aunt's dentist, and another one was a friend of mine in dental school as well. Give me some exposure to different types of environments, how different people run their practices, and I saw everything from extremely slow to being the only doctor, being the only employee there, to very busy and seeing 16 patients a day and doing 16 hygiene checks a day too.
Okay. All right. So you finished college, no gap year, you went right to dental school. And was it
Correct.
4.4? Did you?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So you had a 4.0, so there's no question that school's not really an issue. What did you feel about when you got to dental school? Did you think I did the right thing? Did you think overwhelming? What was your first thoughts in dental school?
Well, it was definitely humbling, being used to being a honor roll type student, and you're just barely scraping by average grades and run of the mill. That was kind of probably one of the first times that I've been beyond challenged. I've failed a class in dental school before even too, so uh, I guess we've all got our strengths and weaknesses, and I certainly know that occlusion wasn't my strength. So, uh,
That was a horrible class.
oh yeah,
That was the hardest class to get through. It was a 1 credit my first year of dental school. I'll never forget it. Dr.
right.
Norman Mole. I was like, oh my God. And it was probably one of the more important things you want to probably pick up. And I was like, oh God, this was brutal.
Yeah, some things just click with people, and certain subjects just you can't just find a rhythm with. If there's a way that you can't find ways to absorb the information or retain it, it
Uh-huh.
just can't happen sometimes. So.
So when you're in dental school, any thoughts specializing or any fields that really kind of stoked your fire? Anything?
I don't know that I really had any thoughts. I kind of still like the allure of the general dentistry because it still gives you the freedom to be able to go into many other areas that you would want. And, I do run a pretty robust practice with a wide range of services. I do all on 4 surgeries. You go for extra training for that type of stuff. I do Invisalign type treatment. Um, I am the kind of person who likes to push myself. I always felt that when I was working for the corporate dentistry that I absolutely was not meeting my potential. And, it was extremely rewarding to be able to get off into my own practice to decide how I would like to practice and what kinds of things I would like to push myself to do. So general dentistry always had its allure to me for sure.
Okay, so you graduate, no GPR, went right to practice. What was it?
Yeah.
What was it like?
I had a great opportunity. I had a great mentor at the corporate DSO that I was at. Very experienced doctor, kind of similar to the type of dentistry that I do now. He was placing implants from the get-go, sinus augmentations, and all of that. So he was a great resource. He was very willing to help teach me. Maybe not the surgery aspect kind of things. You can't just watch somebody and start placing implants. Well, you can, but I don't know if you would really want to. But he would mentor me, and we would book some molar root canals all on a certain day, and he would kind of supervise me and give me advice and stuff. And we would do that maybe about once a month for about 4 months. So you just tend to pick some of your maybe more difficult cases or things that maybe you would like a little extra help with. And it was a great relationship for me to be able to get my feet wet. The corporate dentistry was, kind of a fast pace type of an environment. So I certainly don't have regrets about starting there. I didn't necessarily know better. It was the only thing that I really kind of did consider out of dental school. I was in we have like a mentorship type of a program set up through our dental association. And the gentleman I was paired with was a periodontist in this corporate group. So um, there was kind of like a big growth of corporate offices back then too. So it just kind of seemed fitting. I was like, well, I mean, is this the way that the dental industry is going, is towards these corporations and larger offices and stuff. So that's kind of where I went. I wound up buying in as an owner after 5 years. I'm sorry, 3 years. I bought in as an owner. And it was at my very first ownership meeting that I had realized that I made a mistake, that the amount of money sticking in these groups that isn't getting sent to like the East Coast and things of that nature is just pitiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get right into it. So you graduate, you go into this corporate world, and what was it like when you first started? What was the schedule like? What did you feel prepared for it? A couple friends
Yeah.
of mine that, like Marquette, I think they graduated, they felt fairly confident in their clinical skills. Like they felt they had a pretty good exposure to the different disciplines in dental school. Would you say that you were prepared, or did you say that you were like overwhelmed? What was it like when you first
I
started?
don't think I was overwhelmed, and I think I was kind
Okay,
of like
great.
prepared at a bare minimum level. I was
Okay,
still struggling even with some surgical extractions. There's some teeth are certainly a lot harder to get out than others, and I would have to rely often on other doctors that were there to either give me a hand or even bail me out outright. And that maybe happens to almost anybody, I would imagine. In terms of like removable stuff, it's like I could piece all the steps together of like making a denture or a partial, but it really wasn't until I did my very first case outside of school that I was finally able to kind of like grasp all those steps in sequence versus breaking them all up and individualizing each step of the process. So I'd say I felt prepared. I didn't feel like, I'm just being thrown into the lion's den or anything.
when you started, were you given some leeway to learn, or did you feel like you really had to pick up immediately your speed, your diagnostic, all those kind of things? What was it like?
Well, I think if there was any pressure to pick up things, it was definitely more on me than anywhere else. It definitely wasn't in the corporate setting. I think everybody there was um, very accommodating to just letting practice come and practice happen.
So
So
when
there
you
certainly
say,
wasn't.
if I don't interrupt you, I'm sorry, but when you say the practice part, the different disciplines, so, surgery, operative, restorative, crown and bridge, what were some of the areas that did you naturally gravitate? Sounds like you enjoy the surgical part. Did you
I don't
gravitate?
think I really enjoyed the surgical part until I started getting to more some of like the advanced type
Uh-huh.
procedures, socket preservation grafting, and then maybe wisdom teeth, which wasn't really allowed for me in the corporate setting either.
Sure.
But, the more skilled you get at things, the more you tend to either like them. And then, if it's something that you do like, then you tend to gravitate more towards that. So again, learning how to place implants is one thing, but a next evolution of that would be learning all on four implants and surgeries and things of that nature too. So I definitely over time have enjoyed the surgical aspect of it. Certainly, as I became more confident, you have to be comfortable in surgery to do that. You can't be standoffish about it. When you're, I don't know, when you're doing surgery, you have to not be afraid to reflect flaps and see the bone and look for mental foramens and things of that nature. So you definitely can't tiptoe around it. You gotta go all in. You gotta be confident in what you're doing for sure.
Okay. Where did you pick up the training aspects to add some of these things, some of these tools and skill sets and
One of the
implants,
first
those things?
courses that I did in private practice. So like the corporate offices, they would offer a lot of like their own CEs and stuff, but again, it didn't necessarily gear towards your own professional development. They kind of want you to practice how they want you to practice, and maybe some of it is just fluff CE, or maybe it's even more business geared CE because that helps their bottom line too. But one of the first classes I did after getting into my own private practice was a clear aligner therapy, and Invisalign was really good about putting on a lot of CE back in the day. It's not a huge part of my practice, but it's always something that can kind of complement general dentistry, especially if maybe you're talking about minor changes or cosmetic changes or pre-prosthetic changes. It can come in very handy. So again, we don't do too many clear aligner cases in any single year, but it's still good to have that in your repertoire to be able to help any of your aspects of general dentistry. My implant training I did through the California Implant Institute. They're based out of San Diego, California, and they do surgeries in Rosarito, Mexico. They have a clinic down there. It's a week-long hands-on. I think I don't know if they gave you a guarantee or anything like that, but I think they tell you to expect that you can place roughly about 30 implants, and it went very well. I think that really catapulted my clinical experience and confidence. And it was maybe a couple of years later then that I went back to them for all-on-4 surgery training, which if you're already placing implants, it's not that much more difficult or involved. It's just a matter of being able to plan exactly where you want these implants. And now with things like guided surgeries and stuff, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of, is your hand going to be perfectly aligned for a surgery versus, you're going to get as many implants in as possible to give the greatest, say, predictability and long-term success.
Okay. When you started in the practice, what did it look like for you? How much kind of debt service were you carrying? What was your expectations in terms of making a living? What was that like?
Well, I don't know that I had certain expectations. I was probably making in the corporate setting about 150,000 a year, kind of right from the get-go,
Okay.
and give and take. And the debt service on my first practice was roughly 450,000. And
That
when
was when
you're
you
kind of
bought
like,
your first practice, you're saying?
correct.
Okay.
And when you're younger and when you're going through school, school is the most expensive debt that you've probably had at that point. But then you graduate, you start working, maybe you buy a house, and now you've maybe just say double that debt that you've already had from school, and you go and buy a practice, and now it's like doubled again. So it's hard to fathom those types of economics when you're so little experienced in the world. And I don't necessarily know what kind of expectations that I had for how much money I'd want to make. I think I'm just kind of like looking at things as years are going by, and I'm kind of saying, am I content with this or not? And I began to grow thoughts that I wasn't content with it, which is why I had to kind of like look for a change and make a change. But when you're sitting in the corporate world and you're making roughly say 150 to 200,000, it is kind of hard when you're graduating with the kind of debt that you are to really enjoy the rewards of the profession that you would like to, when maybe that's only enough to make payments on, say, your student loans and maybe just a mortgage.
Yeah, that's where I was going
know,
with it. Like,
and you're living a very modest life even too. I know that that's not the same for everybody. I know there's a lot of people that maybe come right out of school and they're buying fancy cars right off the bat, but I wasn't. I was living very modestly in a very small bungalow house. I bought my first car out of dental school was a used car. Um, so when I first started in private practice, maybe we're pulling in 30,000 a month, maybe 40,000 a month. There's a lot of openings in the schedule. So there's a little bit of anxiety about, yeah, you've got pressure. You've got to be able to pay your team. You got to continue running operations. You got to bring in enough money for all of these other expenses before you kind of start to pay yourself. But it kind of worked out. I wound up knowing that I was going to be transitioning into owning my own practice. I had looked into a consulting service, and I would recommend them to anybody. I think they did great stuff for me. And even at the very least, if they gave me the confidence to know that everything that I was doing was going to continue to work out and improve me even more, it was worth its weight in gold just for that alone. Because again, I was used to a corporate setting where a lot of the
yeah.
other stuff was being handled, and now you're the one in charge of all of it. So it was a really good decision to go with a consultant.
Well, think about it, right? You're in a situation where I won't say it's the opposite, but it's close to the opposite of a fee-for-service practice is working in a corporate setting. Probably the business model was nothing close to what your business model is now. And I just want to ask you one question as you're because you said after 3 years you bought into the corporation, so you were part owner. What was it like leaving or getting bought out? Was that complicated?
It was. You had a 5-year period before you were vested enough to be able to get that money back. So if I would have left within my first year, everything that I invested would have been a complete loss. After the first year, I would only get 25%. After the second year, I would only get 50%, and so on until the 5th year finally, which is why at my 8th year finally then did I get out.
Did you have to find someone to buy your shares, or what was?
I didn't. They were basically absorbed back by all the other shareholders, and they had somewhat of systems in place in order to have, say, like a slush fund to be able to buy those back even too. So I did
So
not have to
it
find.
wasn't a messy divorce. It was pretty.
Well, it was. I don't think there could ever be divorces that are entirely clean. So I don't think it was ridiculously messy, but I'm certainly not going to say it was clean. No,
Okay.
I didn't necessarily leave with them on good terms. I don't think that they were receptive to the types of changes that I was basically asking them for and not receiving. And at that point, no, it was not clean for sure.
Okay, so your plan was I'm going to stay my 5 years, get my full equity out. Now, when did you find or locate your opportunity to buy outside of this practice?
To buy my private practice?
Practice, yeah. Because you left there and you bought your own practice, right?
Yeah, so there was some time around my 6th or 7th year that I was going to some of the higher ups and telling them and say, hey, look, I mean, we've got doctors that aren't happy. You got tons of doctors, associate doctors that are leaving. I'm an owner. I think the least that I should be entitled to is, not hiring more and more doctors to dilute the patient workload and stuff to keep me busy, that I'm not sitting on my rear end in the back office for half of my time that I'm here at the office.
Uh-huh.
I was working 6 days a week, many of those years. And again, if I'm working roughly 4 months straight with half my schedule being utilized, I could be taking vacation time and spending time at home with my family or doing anything else than just wasting my time in an office that's not busy enough for me to be there. But it's only because of the decisions that corporation type offices look at numbers only, and they would much rather have 4 doctors there that are not very busy at all than they would say 2 that are extremely busy. And it was in one ear and out the other, and maybe they would say that they would want to be supportive, but things just weren't happening to make the changes that I was looking for. And So at that point, I then started working with a, what do you call them, a broker,
Uh-huh.
and looked at a couple offices and eventually found one that was a reasonably good practice for me. And you can't be too picky with offices because they don't come on the market terribly often, especially in an area that you'd either like to work or live.
Sure.
And it was good enough.
Did you have to work around a covenant? Did you have to, like, a certain area you had to be outside of?
Yeah, I think it was roughly a 2-year, 5-mile type of a situation, so that wasn't bad at all.
So you found a, so what was the practice that you got into, and did you specifically look for that model, that independent fee-for-service model?
No, because it wasn't fee for service at the time. He was
Okay.
Delta Premier,
All right.
and Delta Premier back then was fantastic. It was Premier. It was one of the best plans in the country. And just me being there for the 10 years that I was, and just seeing like every single year not getting a fee increase, and then starting to put two and two together and realizing and saying, how can we keep doing these services for these kinds of fees? Particularly, it wasn't really until, COVID hit and all the inflation really started getting haywire in the price of a box of gloves that I really started saying, it's one thing to absorb the lack of fee increases through practice growth and seeing more patients and working harder. I've never been allergic to hard work. But then just starting to really put together what I feel my own self-worth is. And again, desiring more, and eventually saying, you got to cut a cord.
Okay. So you were Delta Premier, and in you said COVID. So you got out of that and you went to, basically you dropped insurances in 2020?
It wasn't right in 2020, but that's when I first started, trying to put two and two together and saying,
Yeah.
there has to be better ways. Clearly I was seeing the greed of the insurance companies. And it was then 2022 where we had our first year of dropping Delta in that practice. And it was at the end of that year that I got my Patterson rep knew a retiring doctor who's been trying to get out. And he brought to my attention another doctor who was retiring. And he put together a fairly nice new build of an office. And I told him, I was like, I got to be honest, there's a 90% chance I've got no interest in doing this. I was busy enough, didn't really care to want to entertain the idea. And I went and looked at it, and it's not that it was too good to be true, but it was a very nice put together office. I was interested in, say, relocating my office or building a new office. And again, with the price of materials skyrocketing,
Yeah.
it was very unfeasible then to start considering doing something like that. And for the value of what this practice was being asked for, to be only 5 years newly built, it was very professionally done, very nice. It kind of made sense that if I didn't do it, somebody else was going to do it. And why not me? So
This was your second location now?
this is the second location. So,
all right. But your first location, let me get the timeline right. So your first location, you're in the process of ridding yourself of dental insurance. I'm not going to say dependency, but participation. And you're also looking at purchasing a practice, all kind of all coming together at the same time.
Correct. It was kind of like in the middle of the year that it was brought to my attention of this other guy who was looking to want to retire. And we finally closed on that deal November of that same year.
Okay.
Now, because we didn't want too much tumultuousness with patients, dropping insurances and stuff like that, we decided to stay in network. Again, the second location was Delta Premier only. Actually, I shouldn't say that. They were Blue Cross Blue Shield, maybe one other one, and Delta Premier. And their Premier fees were actually even less than what I was getting at my other location.
Okay.
So we decided to kind of stick with them, at least for that year. But then I said, you know what? Why not? We did it once, we can do it again. And then we dropped them then that following year. So at this point now we are fully fee for service at both offices.
For how long have you been fully fee for service now, both practices?
So it's been 2 years for the first location. And now I believe It was just the start of this year at the second location.
Okay, so it's been 4 months then, 5 months. Okay.
Correct.
Talk about then, please tell us how you dropped the insurance in your I'll call it your primary, your first location. How did you go about doing it? What did you use? Letters, conversations? How did you go about doing that?
All of the above. And, from talking with other people and being part of Facebook groups, kind of pick up on some conversations that other people have and things that they've done too. And so we always know that Delta winds up sending a letter as soon as you let them know you're doing this. They'll send a letter saying, hey, run and go find another in-network provider. So we made sure that we sent all of our letters to our patients first saying, this is what we're planning on doing. Just so you know, you will still have benefits with us. And if you want to continue to see us, yes, it might wind up costing you a little bit more money now, but you do still have the right to be able to see us if you choose to. I don't think that we indicated on there that Delta was going to send them a letter or anything like that. I think we just stayed to our own business and how it would affect us.
How big an impact were Delta in your practice? Like what percentage of your patients were Delta?
At the primary location, it was roughly, I'd say 40 to 50%.
So half your practice.
Right. And
folks, that's, I mean, every time I talk to someone that's been through this, it's always, just think about every other patient you see is on that insurance plan. And you had to have some trepidation, some fear. I mean, what was it like on your side of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the, would I have actually pulled the trigger on that a year earlier if I didn't have the trepidation? But again, there comes a point where you're like, your team is making now almost double what they were when I very first started employing them. And you have to rationalize it, and you have to say financially this has to make sense, and it has to start one doctor in one office at a time.
Oh, I love that. That's my feeling.
Well, certainly, I mean, that's the truth about it. And, I feel maybe say privileged that I graduated almost 20 years ago when school debts were half of what they are now. And economically, somebody who's coming out of school with $400,000 in debt and they're making the little bit that they are because of these poor reimbursements, economically, it cannot add up. It doesn't pencil. So the economics have to change, and the only way that it's really going to change are by people like myself and other people maybe listening to your podcast that are going to say, fine, I have to have the courage to say that this can't make sense for me anymore. I don't have to struggle financially. We have to find a way to make it work for me. And if that means that maybe you were used to working 5 days a week all of your career and now you're working 4 days, maybe those types of adaptations have to happen. Maybe you have to buy a second office and merge it into your first practice. Maybe you need a second standalone office. I don't necessarily think that that's the model for everybody. It made sense for me because again, it was almost too good to pass up. But it was almost like a hedge against knowing that would there be a slowdown when I would drop these insurances completely.
That's interesting.
And I don't have regrets about it, because if it was just me, I don't think I would do it again, but I do employ 2 hygienists and an assistant. And if we were just down to say 3 days a week, they would probably want to get jobs elsewhere. And that would be a little bit more tumultuous for them as well. So the fact that I could take them now and employ them at both locations as a full-time position, everybody's very happy.
I got to ask you, how do you personally manage? You have 2 offices, 2 standalone offices. Are you the only doctor in both offices?
I am. So we did have an associate. It was shortly after COVID that I got an associate at my first location because, when everybody was coming back from COVID, it was just off the wall busy and I couldn't keep up. I was working late, going in early, working through my lunches 9 months straight. And I finally said, I can't do that anymore. So we got an associate. He was with us for about 2.5 years before he got offered partnership at his primary office. So he wound up leaving us September of, was it just last year? And we employed a part-time semi-retired doctor at the new location to kind of fill in so that we would have a little bit more availability than just the Wednesdays and the Fridays that we were originally offering when we took ownership of that office. He has since outright retired, and now it is only just me at either office.
So you working 5 days a week?
We were starting 5 days a week, so I was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday at my primary office,
Right.
and then Wednesdays and Fridays at the second office. Since dropping Delta, we have become less busy, that now we are only working Wednesdays at the second location. And now we reserve Fridays mostly for just some of our bigger, either sedation cases or some of our bigger surgery cases, which is probably how I always maybe say dreamed of wanting things to operate. To be able to do some of these sedation cases and the larger surgeries is very difficult when you have to get interrupted twice an hour for hygiene checks. So it works out very nice then.
How far apart are the two locations?
Roughly 8 miles apart.
Oh my. So 15, 20-minute drive?
Easily, yeah. Yeah, maybe even
That's
less
nothing.
than that. Nope, not at all. And
Good for you.
I do maybe say have ambitions that I would like to merge them together, because to pay rent at two locations, certainly from a financial standpoint, doesn't make sense. And if this newer location is kind of more newly built, is big enough, it would be great to be able to have everybody all in one. But I still think that there's a little bit of that trepidation with that kind of a move, because, you know, if you move your office across the street, some people would still not follow you. But maybe that might be a more medium-term goal as well.
Okay, so with your experiences, what are some advice you have for people who may be thinking about dropping, look at that number and say, geez, that's 50%. What was your, first of all, what was your success like in terms of how many people did you retain that were in the big D?
Yeah, we actually do still have a good number of patients that are in Delta specifically. And, you know, there's still a lot of patients that have other insurances that we've always been out of network with. So, you know, that kind of gave me the confidence to say that, you know, if we have all these other patients that we're already out of network with, why do we have to have such a hang up about this one, given that there's such a large cohort, I guess. But depending on how many insurances you're in, you know, you want to do this plan smart. You don't want to just say, all right, I heard this podcast and I'm going to walk in there tomorrow and I'm going to write up letters to all 7 of these insurance companies. I've always heard, even from consultants and from other people who've gone through it, you absolutely want to pick some of your worst paying insurances and, you know, do it 1 or 2 at a time. But eventually you have to kind of come to a realization of what is it worth for you to continue to do this kind of dentistry, what you want to get paid out of it, because this isn't a hobby really for almost anybody. Maybe some people might do this because they like it, but you do it because you want to get the rewards out of it. And you have to know what your self-worth is. And if doing a crown for $600 and your lab bill is 150 and you still have all this overhead to take in consideration, fine, that's for you to decide. But if you want more, then you got to come to the table with a plan on how you're going to get there.
Okay, talk about, if you don't mind sharing, I don't know how much you want to share, please feel free to either defer or not answer, but what happened, I mean, income-wise, what did it look like for you as you started to get out of network? Did you have it, you had to see an increase in your bottom line, but
yeah, income fairly well stayed the same. And, you know, we did get slower. So I will certainly own up to the fact that we probably lost about maybe 15% of our patient base. So you're basically maybe making the same, but you're absolutely working less. So you've got more free time. I used to work at the dental school when I bought my first office before I merged the second practice into it. I had the extra time that I could work at the dental school, and I enjoyed doing that. When I bought that second practice, I had to give that up because then I was busy enough to be working 5 full days a week. And I'm kind of getting to the point again where if I've got Fridays available again, would I be interested in getting back into doing that? It's too early to tell now, so I'm not making any kind of a decision on that. But to have the same income and still be able to work less is very, I don't know, empowering as well.
Well, you got 3 kids, you said, right?
Oh yeah.
And how old are they?
12, 11, and 8.
So they're, prime time.
Yeah, you can't say enough about making sure that you've got the ability and the time to be able to spend with kids. And I don't think it really came to that realization until my middle child turned 9, and I thought of it and I was like, man, we are halfway to my middle child being an adult now. We're halfway done with all this that we've done since we started with them. And I don't even really remember what my life was like before we had kids. And it's going to come soon enough where they're going to be grown up. They're going to be out of the house, and I'm going to be back to that kind of a lifestyle. So you absolutely have to make sure that you're getting as much attention to your family, especially your children, as you can, because it's pretty ridiculous when you maybe are looking at some of these Facebook memories that pop up, and it was only 5 years ago that you were on like a trip to Disney, and those kids look miniature compared to what they are now. And that's just 5 years. And I'm turning 43 this year, and 5 years is nothing. But when you're talking about a 9-year-old child, 5 years is almost everything. So there's
Well, I think
far more important things in life than making sure that you're a slave to your job. It's one thing to provide for them; it's another thing to be there for them too.
Well, I always said time is your absolute most important asset, no matter what. And I think that's a great epiphany. And I had that, my wife actually said it the other day over I have 2, my niece has kids, and she was saying, they're 9 years old. They're halfway to being potentially gone when they're 18, like you said.
Yeah.
That first 9 years, you might say, passed in a blink of an eye, another blink of an eye, then they're out of the house. What do you want to do with your time with that you're here with them,
Yeah, and it's raising kids is it's interesting because you don't know what you don't know. And again, it took me, say, that long to realize those kinds of things. And when you maybe start to see them slipping away, you almost have to like double down and make sure that you're appreciating every moment that you do have of it, for sure. It's kind of like the graduating dental school, and all you really know is about the dental school debt. But then you buy the house, and then you've got that house debt again, and then you buy a practice, and then you've got all of that. So you never really knew about all this other debt that would be coming. Just like your kids, you got to really start to learn to appreciate how much time you've got left with them.
So would you say, I don't want to say it for you, but what I'm getting, the single most important factor to getting back your independence in your practice was it allowed you to be A, more present with your family, but B, more independent in all of the things that you're able to do now?
For sure. I mean, it would be impossible for me to imagine the life that I would have had I not gotten out of the corporate setting where I was. I did feel very restrained. I did feel like I was not meeting my potential. And being able to be in a situation where you can, for the most part, control your own destiny, whether it's, you can't make patients show up, you can't make patients whip out their pocketbooks, but you can improve yourself to turn your practices and turn your skill sets into the types of things that are going to control that, maybe through what you're offering, your marketing, your ability to market, and what you know about business and things of that nature. So absolutely, my ability to kind of run it the way that I wanted to is absolutely what is now giving me the life that I have now. And I know that I wouldn't have had that had I not made the changes that I did.
Now you're the business part, right? So in your environment that you currently work and live in, are fee-for-service practices a little bit more rare? Was there, any of that, geez, I'm going to be a lot different than the people around me? Give some people the picture of what your environment is like, because you know what you hear, right? Well, that only works where you are. Well, that won't work here in this
that's
city.
exactly it. But getting back to the you don't know what you don't know is, I am shocked frequently to hear certain dentists that are completely fee for service, and these just aren't things that people talk about.
Right.
Maybe some people out there might brag about their office being fee for service. Certainly, like online, there might be a lot of that you come across. But
Yeah, you can only
when you're in
believe
your
half
own
of it.
community, you're not having these kinds of conversations saying, "Oh, I'm dropping this insurance company," and that's what that all that collusion business is about. They don't want people to be able to talk about that, which is fine. I understand that. But maybe you just happen to hear from word of mouth, or maybe like a sales rep that says, "Oh, this person's actually dropping this insurance," or something like that. So I'm actually kind of surprised to hear how many dental offices around my area are fee for service. Um, my Delta rep specifically told me that they were trying to get rid of the Premier network altogether. They really want to push everybody to PPO. I don't know why she divulged that information to me. That seems like a big,
Now,
too much of it.
what was the rep that told you this?
It was my Delta rep.
Okay.
She outright told me that they want to get rid of the Premier network and push everybody to PPO. So, at that point, you have to understand that every year that they don't increase fees in that Premier network, that you are voluntarily taking a pay cut on their dime, because if their purpose is to try to get rid of that network, they're going to keep trying to pay dentists as little as possible while they're still willing to be in that network. That doesn't make any sense. So
Do you have a lot of corporate in your neighborhood, like where you
like corporate dental offices?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, the one that I was with, they exploded from when I first started with them, maybe 20 some offices. By the time I left them, they were over 50. And I think they more recently got out by Heartland Dental too. So yeah, corporate's everywhere. I mean, Aspen was not even in our neck of the woods when I first graduated, and they've exploded everywhere too. So there's definitely plenty of the corporate and plenty of private too. I think there has to be a balance. I think some of the growth of the corporate has severely slowed, again, because the economics can't make sense for everybody. I think for you to get the rewards that you need to be able to make kind of loan payments and stuff that you have to, private practice has to remain around.
Do you have any, as a solo doc and a solo practice, which, the Alliance of Independent Dentists that Jill and Christine are a part of up in Massachusetts, it's kind of a neat organization. Do you guys have any say organizations or groups, like, for example, coverage, should someone get sick in an office? Do you guys have any kind of groups like that you work with?
I can't say I'm aware of anything like that, no.
Yeah, we had it in our town, because we had a lot of independent small, doc shops, so to speak, and there was a group, in-office aid is what it was set up as, and you agreed if someone were to get injured or something, and it was a 90-day coverage, and it pretty much covered that time where your disability policy might take a 90-day wait. That was very popular. So you agreed to cover it, and they took 30 people in that group. And so you'd cover in a period of 90 days, you might have to work 3 different days. It was set up well before me, but I thought it was a really neat thing. And the practice I ended up getting into was a practice that we worked at. A guy had an eye injury, and I was like, oh, I could see myself here. And that's how it worked out for me. And I don't know if that part of your community, anything like that?
So, being in the greater Milwaukee area, it's a big enough urban area that there tends to be enough people that are, say, semi-retired that, they wanted to get out of the 9 to 5 type stuff, but
Sure.
they want to sign up to do locum tenens type work. So there's definitely those types of, say, groups out there that employ doctors for those purposes. And even the broker that I used, they tend to run services like that as well. So the broker where I found my first office tends to employ doctors on a locum tenens type basis as well for those types of services. So I've never really found or heard of an issue where a doctor either passed away unexpectedly or had some sort of an emergency like that, where their office couldn't get coverage that they needed.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing it with us and taking the time. And folks, I got to be 100% transparent. I was supposed to talk to Dan at a certain time, and I actually took a little nap, and I got a message like, hello, hello. I was like, oh my God, I blew it. It's the first time I've ever done that. I really apologize. Thank you. Thanks for
No
sharing
problem.
with us. Some other experiences that you'd like to share with our listeners? Anything you want to put out there? It's potpourri time. Anything you want to talk about?
I don't know. I guess I don't really have anything that comes to mind that I wanted to really get out of this. It just sounded like a neat idea. I'd never done anything like it. And I do think that the fee for service thing is something that um I don't know if it's important. It's not that it's important, but I think it's important for other people to realize that this might have to be your evolution and you shouldn't be afraid of it.
Yeah. I
I
think that's the
certainly.
most important thing. I think it's not, you're not forcing it down anybody's throat, but gosh darn it, it exists.
Well,
You
right,
can do
and
this.
you have to look at the economics of things. And if you've gone 10 years and you're getting minimal insurance reimbursements and your cost of employees are literally like doubling in that same time, the money's got to have to come from somewhere. And the way that I was looking at it, I was giving 30% discounts to my Delta people, and I'm not necessarily ripping off the other people who are paying out of pocket, but it just didn't seem fair that they get such huge discounts and everybody else didn't. So I said, let's make this an even playing field for everybody. I could actually lower my fees a tiny bit, or at minimum, not increase my fees, and still make things cheaper than for everybody.
30%.
So have the confidence to start taking a look at those numbers and know the numbers. You can't be ignorant of these matters. So take the time to look at it and see if it fits for you.
There's a lot of folks that don't understand it. They in their fee schedule is a different fee schedule for those patients. So they don't really know what they're actually writing off until they do a deeper dive. And I found that I was kind of surprised, but I could see how it happens. It's easier to run your office, administer your office, if you have one clean set of fee schedule for those patients, but you don't have that bridge to connect it to what it really means to you. Like you said, you knew, you did the math, right? It's 30%.
Right. And anybody who doesn't really know those numbers, you kind of have to, because even if you're just say like an associate or something, your pay is being based off of what you produce and what's collected. So you got to make sure that nobody else is really looking out for you the way that you're going to look out for yourself. So you definitely have to make sure that you're looking into what those numbers are. You have to make sure that that your contract is as fair as what it is in say the next town over and things of that nature. So you can't be ignorant. You have to know the numbers, if not for anybody, for yourself for sure.
Okay, so if people want to reach out to you, Dan, how do they get in touch with you?
So I am more than willing to have anybody message me either on Facebook Messenger or my email as well is marq16dan@yahoo.com.
There you go. Now I got to ask you a question since you're a Marquette guy. Did you follow him this year? Have you followed him last couple years?
I certainly did. I was very well traveled this year. I went to the Maui Invite. I did an away game at Georgetown in DC, took my family. We did an away game in Cincinnati.
There you go.
And I still have never made it to a Big East tournament yet.
You have to.
The problem is that
put that down
that week always tends to follow right around our spring break weeks, and we already take spring break weeks off for all of our employees. And if they're in different school districts, you already got 2 weeks off there. So trying to take too many weeks off all in a row gets very difficult.
If you can swing it, it's a special experience. But your Tyler Kolick, we got to meet him and spend some time with him at the Big East Media Day and talk to him. And what a phenomenal young man. I mean, you couldn't put together a better human being. I host a podcast called the Big East Rewind, and it's all about Big East and the basketball conference and going back to the early days, et cetera. And we got to know some of the guys, and he is as advertised. I think he'll be a great pro.
Yeah,
It was a
he
lot
seems
of
like a
fun.
class act.
Totally. And where he came from and his story, just a great guy.
Yeah, I think
So-
you need a lot. I think you need a lot more of that in professional sports too.
Don't you? Yeah, absolutely. All right. Final question I'm going to ask you. If you could go back in time anywhere, anytime, any place with anyone, do anything, I mean, where would you go and why?
I would definitely go back in time and meet my wife earlier than I did. She's the best thing in my life, and I would want even more time with her. So that'd be my answer.
How long you been married?
17 years.
Good for you, man. Yeah, I'm 30. I'll be 38 this year. So good for you. That's a great answer. And I hope my wife hears this and hears me also, backing you up on this, but
I should
that's
say
a
I'm
great
gonna
answer.
have to get a copy of this podcast. I think my wife's gonna have to hear it. So
I'll vouch for you. Well, again, I apologize for being late. Thanks for your patience. I'm super glad you decided to come on. I gotta ask you one thing. You speak very eloquently. Did you ever take any speaking courses or?
well, I don't know if it's from any kind of formal training. I had to take a public speaking class in school in undergrad,
Mhm.
but I don't know that truthfully any of that gift is from that type of environment. I think it's just from maybe call it a natural gift, I guess. I don't know. When you asked me about this, I didn't ask you for any questions in advance. I think I just like to come up with these kinds of answers off the top of my head and stuff. So I do think I am slightly gifted in being able to say the right words and the things that I'd like in my thoughts out loud. So
Folks, I got to tell you, that was one thing we talked about before we started. I said, anything you want to talk about, or you want to just roll with it? Let's just roll with it. I was like, I'm in. I'm
well,
all
sometimes
in.
that's the most natural way to get answers. And I think if you're trying to either read or memorize pre-planned scripts, you don't always really get the thoughts out the way that you'd want to. But if you have the information in your head, it's a lot easier to convey it when you're just kind of free flowing with it.
Didn't you say today how important it was just to be authentic, though, too?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's the best way to have this conversation. It's like we just met, we're sitting down. For me, it's over a bowl of pasta. For you, maybe it's over.
Hey,
I
that's
don't want to
exactly
use
what
the
I had for
you live
dinner
in
was
Wisconsin,
spaghetti and
but
meatballs today.
All right, well, get back to your family. I appreciate you taking some time for us and sharing your success with all the people out there who may or may not be thinking about it, but folks, it can be done and it can be done anywhere. So thank you
You're
very much.
welcome,
Much
and
success.
thanks for having me.
If I can help you in any way, reach out.
You got it. I'll
Thanks.
see you around.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. If you would like to share your fee for service story, please fill out our contact form at ffsdentistry.com. Also, be sure to join our Fee for Service Dentistry Facebook group. For help starting your dental membership plan, visit dentalmembershipdirect.com and membershipmastercourse.com. Finally, for help with in-house financing, visit dentalfinancingdirect.com. And don't forget, your story is what you make of it. This is your name on the door and your reputation on the line. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.